it's everybody's fucking call signs and not their actual accounts. I don't know why that's showing up. So anyway, one of the comments is not a member. So that guy. Republic Productions, you. You're not a member. So
become a member.
Shut the up. CMJM1221 says, "Hello, gentlemen. Been loving this series so far, and I thought I'd share my first comment here with Skyfall. I do have a lot to say, so forgive me if this becomes too verbose. Here goes. To me, Skyfall is the GoldenEye of the Craig era. Case in point. These two movies share many similarities to each other beyond the boilerplate similarities that many or all Bond movies share. They are both love letters to the franchise as a whole, containing Easter eggs and callbacks. They both are existential Bond films that deal with Bond's purpose in their respective eras, GoldenEye's context being geopolitical, Skyfall's being technological. They're both even named after our hero's two birthplaces. GoldenEye, Jamaica, being his real-life birthplace, and Skyfall, Scotland, being his canonical birthplace. However, I'd like to focus mostly on the villains. Raul Silva and Alec Trevelyan share much in common aside from the surface-level facts of them both being former 00 agents turned criminals with an axe to grind with MI6. They are, as Charlie put in your GoldenEye episode, meta-critics of James Bond. They both mock him for his patriotism.
James Bond. Her Majesty's loyal terrier.
England. The Empire. MI6. You're living in the ruin as well. You just don't know it yet.
They both feign superiority to Bond as an agent.
I was always better.
And you're not nearly the agent I was. I can tell you that.
They even comment on his drinking habits.
I might as well ask you if all the vodka martinis ever silenced the screams of all the men you've killed.
Just look at you, barely held together by your pills and your drink.
That's a good point. Something else that makes them particularly dangerous as adversaries is the level of intimate knowledge they have of our hero. Silva reads to his face that he's deemed psychologically volatile due to his traumatic childhood, although with Alec, it's probably even more violating. I mean, seriously, think about the kind of relationship those two had for James Bond, international man of mystery, to have shared with him the tragic origins of his parents' death.
But where your parents had the luxury of dying in a climbing accident, mine survived the British betrayal and Stalin's execution squads.
Although what makes them special and what helps them elevate their respective movies to such high rankings in the franchise is that they are not only dangerous antagonists, but they are direct foils to Bond. Beyond the cliche of, we're not so different, you and I.
Remember when I told you we're not so different, you and I? We're not so different, you and I. See, I did say that. Very clever.
These two men are quite possibly dark, alternative timeline versions of James Bond. Silva is basically what Pierce Brosnan's Bond could have become, where he never traded from the North Koreans in Die Another Day.
They kept me for 5 months in a room with no air. They tortured me. And I protected your secrets. I protected you. But they made me suffer. And suffer. And suffer.
You had your cyanide.
Threw it away years ago.
I had only one thing left. My cyanide capsule in my back left molar.
A scarred, broken, and cynical agent who stared too long into the abyss. Note that Silva and Trevelyan both view their facial deformities as wounds given to them via betrayal.
It wasn't God who gave me this face. It was you.
Do you know what it does to you? Hydrogen cyanide?
Even though they were, in essence, both self-inflicted.
Finish the job, James. Blow them all to hell.
I broke the tooth and bit into the capsule.
Their tragic flaw directly relates to what I deem to be the primary theme of this movie and the James Bond franchise to an extent. Silva and Trevelyan both accuse James of clinging to old ways of thinking and living in a bygone era. They believe themselves to have transcended the quaint sentimentalities of patriotism and loyalty to Queen and country when in truth they are projecting. All three of them, Bond, Silva, and Trevelyan, are granted new leases on life, but the villains are the ones who are incapable of moving on from their personal grievances. They think they've escaped the shackles of serving their duty to governments when they've merely chosen to serve new masters, money and revenge. What makes Bond the hero, as Charlie argued in the Casino Royale episode, is that he is a man who maintains perspective. It's all about the big picture, the game.
The big picture.
And this is where I think Silva has a leg up on Alec. See, I get it when Alec says that Bond would have never gone along with his schemes, but I never get the sense that Bond ever lost sight of the big picture. Sure, everyone in that movie is rolling their eyes at him and telling him he's old news, but it always seems to slide off of him. It doesn't land. I think the closest anyone got was when Valentine tells him about the Cossacks, but the Bond of GoldenEye remains unfazed and ultimately his instincts vindicate him. Skyfall's Bond is one who's had his own boss and his country's faith in him lost. This is particularly significant as this M has consistently been characterized as someone willing to sacrifice others in the necessity of playing the game. True.
If you think for one moment I don't have the balls to send a man out to die, your instincts are dead wrong.
You used the girl as bait.
Yes. If I'd had my way, you'd still be in North Korea. Your freedom came at too high a price. These bastards want your head. And I'm seriously considering feeding you to them.
Silva points this out to Bond directly when he exposes her lie and when he shows us all his true form. As opposed to GoldenEye, Bond in this movie is visibly conflicted as Silva's greatest strength is not his hacking skills or resources, but his psychological manipulation. He is right. M has been playing fast and loose with the lives of her operatives. This is something she realizes in the scene in the hallway following Silva's interrogation, where she attempts to justify her actions to Bond in the moment before the final showdown where she breaks.
I this up, didn't I?
Silva broke her. His scheme of exposing all undercover agents as punishment for her refusal to rescue him when he was compromised is the perfect penance. However, in this scene, when Bond returns Her Majesty's loyal, beaten terrier, she places all her faith into the one person she can trust. I find it ironic how the
Evil queen of numbers
is presented with all data pointing towards Bond not being ready and decides to go on instinct herself. Not to mention the irony of how in the climax, she's the worm on the hook this time, Bond being the one holding the string. Interesting.
And I'm to be the bait? All right. Just us. No one else.
And Bond, the man she taught to see the big picture, is the one who assures her that it was all in service of playing the game.
No. You did your job.
Number 8 for me, but significantly below GoldenEye. It's still too depressing for me, and the ones above it are, as Q would say, fully loaded. Cheers. I'm exhausted after reading that.
I am about to go to bed. I'm
ready to go
literally
to bed
just gonna
after
say
It's time to cast off.
from here on, guys, we need to limit your character count. No more novels.
Well said, but
yes, regardless of everything I said about how this movie could be better, Silva's motivation and overall goal, coupled with Bond backing up M until the end, is the best argument for a higher than lower rank.
Proxt DT or TTD. This movie is great. Yes, there is some bad choices with Silva's escape sequence. Really pushes the limit on our ability to suspend disbelief. But it is one of the most fun Bond movies to watch. Similar quality to Tomorrow Never Dies. Javier Bardem is great, and his first scene after Bond is captured is one of my all-time favorites. For me, Craig's second best and top 10 in the series. Spectre Tech Chair Engineer 3453, culmination of many ideas Purvis and Wade had been toying with since Twine, MI6 Under Siege, M in Danger, and a disgraced Bond making a comeback. I think it's a very good, but dragged down by some sloppy writing and cheesy fan service. There are some subtle details that I appreciate, such as the near identical framing of the MI6 target practice and the William Tell scene, or how Tanner would like the new underground base if it wasn't for the rats.
I'm still discovering tunnels dating back to the 18th century. Quite fascinating, if it wasn't for the rats.
Yeah, and also Q says something later like,
"Too big and Silva will smell a rat."
I didn't even pick that up. That's a nice little pull there. The strongest sequence were the Shanghai sniper and the Macau casino scene. Bond stalks prey and playing hunches felt very old school. The film strikes a good balance between serious and silly and lets moments to breathe. Visuals and music get to speak for themselves. Love Craig's one-liner too. I think this deserves to live around number 7 on your list. Keep up the good work, guys.
So we had a 7 and an 8.
I'll say I am friendly to number 7. That's after last looking at the list. That's kind of where I'm leaning towards. So anyway, moving on.
I like it above License and Spy Who Loved Me.
I think it just outshines both of those movies.
And I could see it above or below From Russia. That's what I've been kind of grappling with.
Because here's the thing, Trevor. I can go in and be like, I look at this and I'll be like, yeah, I think it's my favorite film. And I can see why I would want to put it above GoldenEye and Casino Royale for personal reasons. But when you lay out some of the flaws in it, I'm like, okay, I can see why you would put it under it. And then I get really kind of questionable with Goldfinger and From Russia with Love because I'm like, those movies are great. And this is like, it's good too. But I feel like this one just outshines when it comes to the story, not the plot, the story elements of the movie. And I have to make that distinction because somebody's going to get that confused. Anyway.
WMCI7FG says, this film feels very overrated. They tease some interesting plot points, but never do anything with them. Like the leaked agents. They're totally forgotten about. Yes. Instead, this film feels like an independent student movie making Bond even more like Batman with none of the charm that the series is so iconically known for. Twine did all these themes better, save for Daniel's smoking body. Bottom 5 for me. Yolt is better.
Bottom 5? Holy crap.
I mean, that's intense.
Yeah, I think he's like missing a good chunk of the movie.
Sure,
And
but at the same time...
Even like Twine, I'm like, Twine's like, no, Twine's not even one of my favorites.
But like overrated, I agree. This movie is, in my view, significantly overrated. Andrew A837 says, Skyfall is by far the most overhyped Bond movie by the general populace. And yet there's nothing Bond about it. Bond is still a grumpy old man, this time equipped with a Jason Bourne earpiece by the world's greatest insult to Bond fandom, Q, who plays mission commander on a Bourne screen barking orders to Bond. Contrast the train sequence with the airport sequence in Casino and you will realize just how awful this is in an action movie. Bond is best when he's in enemy territory doing things alone, and this is for good reason. In Skyfall, he's just another government grunt now with depression and mommy issues. Granted, the first half of the movie before he meets the villain is top tier shit. This movie brings out all the stops to try to make you remember it's Bond. They bring Q back, but he literally starts off by insulting past Q. They make the plot more personal with M, which is fine if the rest of the movie didn't rely on a convoluted and tired villain plan, Joker and Loki Cage, anyone. And by far the worst rendition of it, Q has to plug in laptop at exact second. They try to make Silva kind of like an Alec, but it's very half-baked. If I wanted M in danger, I'd rather watch Twine. Not to mention they forgot the leaked agents or whatever, which is true. I mean, like, by the end of the movie, it's like, what happened with that? We're just to assume that it's like, because he's dead.
But I never
thought,
every time I've seen this movie, I never felt like it was a sticking point. I'm just like, okay, that's not what the movie's about.
Still, it's like,
that's not what the movie's about.
Sure, but it's like
an element,
the movie's
about. That's what the whole movie was about up until a certain point. I put it with all the rest of the Craig down at the bottom teens. Definitely Craig's number 2 best, but that's not saying much at all. QWERTY Manor says, this is a rough draft. Oh, you motherfucker. Plot holes. God damn it, QWERTY. If you say you're going to edit it,
hold on. Let me read this like a drunk person would. Like a Scott. Like a Scott. Plot holes. The trailer's distraction. Anyways, who cares about Home Alone ending? Why is James Bond crying over him? Plug in a laptop. Why? Cinematography tricks people. Action is sluggish, like over-edited more. Movie is just as Twine mixed with Alex T.
You sound like Biden.
I sound like Harry Carey.
Yeah, that's perfect.
I think it's QWERTY Manor is Scott. That's really what, after I read that, I was like, I'm pretty sure QWERTY is Scott.
P. Wilkinson 714 says, Skyfall is a beautifully made movie that easily captures the attention of viewers. I understand why people think so highly of it. I too was wowed upon first viewing, but I think this is the trick that Skyfall plays. Make such a captivating movie that people won't think too hard about it. Well, in true ranked fashion, I thought hard about it, and in doing so, it starts to show some ugly cracks. Okay, the good stuff first. The prologue is great. I like that we're immediately dropped into the middle of a mission. All we know is Bond is chasing someone who just stole a hard drive with classified info about MI6 agents, but that's enough to get things going. The action itself doesn't do anything we haven't already seen in other movies, but I do enjoy it. Having his death lead right into the title song, one of the best, Adele is amazing, of course, gets the audience hooked right away. When we move to Bond in his off-the-grid phase, I love that there's no dialogue in this scene. Instead, his facial expressions and the visual action tells us everything. He's still his typical drinking and womanizing self, but doesn't particularly appear to be enjoying any of it. No doubt weighed down by the previous event of being almost killed due to M's orders. But the thing about Bond is he has this undying goodness inside him. As soon as he sees the news story about the MI6 attack, he knows he has to help. He never allows himself to become jaded with the spy profession to the point of villainy. I like that when Bond returns to MI6, M covers for his failed tests and places her confidence in him anyway. I've always loved this dynamic between Bond and M, where M basically gives the middle finger to her superior and lets Bond do his own thing instead. Another strong point is the cinematography. In particular, the Shanghai-Macau scenes and the scenes at Skyfall are gorgeous. I love the vivid colors of Shanghai-Macau contrasted against the black night sky, and when Bond follows Patrice up the high-rise in Shanghai, the constant flashing of the electronic billboards outside the window creates such a dynamic effect while obscuring Bond from detection. Brilliant work there.
Yeah,
Severine is short-lived as a Bond girl, but I enjoy the scenes of her and Bond and how they restore some of the familiar Bond character traits. In particular, his ability to get a detailed read on her situation after meeting her shows that he's still sharp-minded. And the way he immediately seduces her on the boat shows he still has his charm. The scenes in Shanghai/Macau are my favorite from the movie, not only because they look great, but also because we really get to see Bond back in his element, whereas the rest of the movie, he doesn't quite act or feel like his normal self. Javier Bardem puts on a great performance as Silva. He's very obviously in the mold of Trevelyan, except that he has this almost Joker-esque absurdism that ratchets it up a notch. He and Bond are a great juxtaposition in that they're both victims of the same thing, but one chose good and one chose evil. I think the character of Silva is a strong point of the movie, and they did a good job of clearly establishing his motivations and the overall stakes at play. I love a good Bond ally, and Kincaid delivers. Love his "Welcome to Scotland" quip after he blows the guy away with the sawed-off shotgun. A quick aside, Albert Finney also cameos in one of my favorite films, Ocean's 12, which also features Robbie Coltrane, who shared the screen in Harry Potter with Ralph Fiennes.
Rafe Fiennes.
Gotta love all these connections.
It's fun to have Q Moneypenny back, but I thought they did a really nice job with the flirty banter and play between Bond and Moneypenny, especially when they're together in Macau. Okay, now, on to the not so good. The first crack to develop for me is when Bond and Severine are headed to the island to meet Silva. I thought Bond was supposed to be undercover in order to sneak onto the island, and the night he boards the boat, it's sort of implied that he did so covertly. But the next day, as they approach the island, he's just blatantly walking around for all the henchmen and crew to see. This blows his cover and exposes Severine as a co-conspirator. Then, the henchmen randomly decide to hold him at gunpoint, even though they seem completely unbothered by Bond's persistence at first. It's obvious that the writers just needed a way to get Bond to the island. But it feels like they got lazy with the finer plot points here, and it's basically said, it doesn't matter if it doesn't make perfect sense. And I sort of agree that it doesn't matter that much, but this is the first of many coincidences and plot holes in the movie that really start to snowball over time. All the scene needs was a small tweak, like maybe the crew discovers Bond as a stowaway, and that's why they hold him at Severine captive.
Even as the nitpick king, I don't have a problem with this sequence at all because it's consistent with Bond's character. Yeah, Bond could have snuck around the island trying to get a beat on Silva, but that's not his style. Remember, Bond's philosophy as a spy isn't to hide behind aliases or disguises, but to go straight in to confront and provoke the bad guy.
Agent. Provocateur.
James Bond. You'll find the reservation under Beach.
Welcome, Mr. Bond.
Welcome, Mr. Beach. Or is that Bond? I'm a little confused.
I really think you people should find a better place to meet.
Mr. Bond, what a pleasure.
And remember, he only surrendered himself after he'd activated his distress beacon, so he knew backup was on the way no matter what happened next.
Radio!
Then we get to the worst sequence in the whole movie, when Silva escapes from MI6 prison. True. It's not that it's a boring scene, it's just that it makes no freaking sense. For starters, why are you housing Silva in any sort of building that can be hacked by computers when you know he's already hacked your system in the past? I agree, just put like a safety chain on his cell door. It just spirals from here. The worst part of the scene is Q. He brags about how he's this computer nerd super genius, then proceeds to hook up Silva's malware-infected computer straight into MI6's system. When their system is hacked by the program Silva installed so he could escape, Q yells, "Can someone tell me how the hell he got into our system?" You plugged his computer into the system, you dumbass. That's how, you fucking asshole, stupid piece of shit. Then you have the crazy chase between Bond and Silva, where you really have to suspend disbelief because the timing and coordination of everything is way too perfect, particularly when he derails the subway at the exact right moment. Normally, I'm willing to just go along with stuff like this because, after all, it's a movie and it's supposed to be entertaining. But for me, it just further poisons an already stupid scene. We don't even get to see how Bond escapes that situation. It felt very much like a let's turn Silva into the Joker moment by doing something chaotic. Him disguised as a police officer and blowing up a subway is a little too similar to when the Joker disguises himself as a nurse and blows up the hospital in The Dark Knight. The subway thing just feels like a waste other than to show that Silva is crazy, which we already knew. When Tanner tells M that Silva escaped and they need to move to a secure location, why does she brush it off so flippantly? Doesn't she realize Silva is coming for her? More importantly, why doesn't Bond immediately realize Silva is heading for M? He wastes all this time chasing him for nothing instead of rushing to protect M and anticipate Silva's next move. After Bond gets stuck with the derailed subway, the next time we see him, he has suddenly made it all the way to M's hearing. So he knew that's where he needed to go all along, so again, why did he chase Silva? Tanner and Mallory are literally the only smart people in the entire prison break scene, and I do love the redeeming moments for Mallory here, but it's just riddled with plot conveniences to support the action sequences and stunts, and it's fine to watch with your brain shut off, but really stupid when you start to think too hard. That's me this whole episode. I'm just like, turn your brain off at your own risk, but like, you can nitpick this movie to hell. The scenes at Skyfall aren't as bad as the prison escape, but I have mixed feelings. Bond decides to seclude himself in M and lure Silva to come fight them while bringing no weapons or supplies. All of the key decision makers at MI6 are in on the Skyfall plan, so it's not as if they didn't have access to this stuff. Obviously, I completely agree. Why didn't anybody send help to their boss and best agent? Just because M said no one else doesn't mean they had to listen to her.
Just us. No one else.
And by the way, this would have been the perfect moment for Moneypenny to show up and redeem herself before ultimately realizing that the field isn't for her and taking a desk job. But whatever. So it turns into a MacGyver / Home Alone sort of thing, and I don't think that's what the writers were going for tonally, but that's how it comes off. I'll give it full credit for being original, though, and I sort of love it in a guilty pleasure way, I agree. Then we get another dumb plot convenience where Kincaid is using a flashlight despite the entire night sky glowing with fire, which exposes M's position to Silva. All of these little plot conveniences really add up across the whole movie and weigh down my enthusiasm for it by the end. That's my whole point. She's sitting in the chapel perfectly calm. We know she got injured at some point during the raid on the house, but there's no indication it's a mortal wound. After Bond shows up and kills Silva, last rat standing, great line and callback, M says in a healthy and normal voice,
007. What took you so long?
The very next moment, she completely collapses and dies in a mere matter of seconds. It was such a whiplash, jarring thing. It's like the writer said, it, just kill her already. We're done with this movie. To be clear, I like the emotion of the moment, and Dench and Craig both played it well, but much like the scene where they approach the island, the writing needed some fine-tuning here to give us a more believable sequence for how M goes from being simply injured to actively dying. Yeah, I don't know. M's a pretty tough broad, so I buy it. As I've said before, I think there are a lot bigger problems in the scene than her sudden collapse. Overall, it's a visually stunning movie that's perfectly enjoyable if you don't think too hard. Yes. Everything from Shanghai / Macau through Silva's capture is splendid vintage Bond. For me, it's ultimately bogged down by an excessive amount of plot conveniences, holes, and shortcuts. Somewhere between 9 to 12 feels appropriate.